Welcome to this talk on modern enlightenment, how to awaken, heal, and manifest in a fast-paced world. Let's first start by defining enlightenment. Classically, it's defined as a non-dual state of peace, bliss, joy, meaning, and fulfillment. And most of the spiritual texts agree, from Christianity to Buddhism, from advanced meditators to psychedelic facilitators, that enlightenment has three qualities to it. This being of wholeness, complete in oneself, totally self-accepting and self-loving. The quality of nothingness, to lack identity, to be without beliefs. Because as spiritual teacher Byron Katie shares, beliefs create suffering and beliefs create separateness. And then the quality of allness, the idea of being one with all beings and one with all things, with the nature that surrounds us, with the people in our lives. But I'd like to view enlightenment as a spectrum. It's not that you are enlightened or not. It's that we are on the path towards enlightenment, on this inner journey. In wholeness, it's from the beginning of dissatisfaction with self, to allowing the spectrum of human emotion and expression, all the way from shame to anger, fear to grief, and then to full acceptance of self and self-love. Along the spectrum of nothingness, it's from righteousness and rigid beliefs, the separateness that might be inherent in divisions amongst religion or politics, for example, to relaxing of protective barriers, curiosity, and compassion to engage with others. And then finally, to total openness, the release of positionality of good or bad, and into the place of total surrender to the present moment, to what life has to offer. And then in the quality of allness, from the position of isolation, loneliness, egocentrism, which is the belief that the world revolves around us, to allowing and feeling the impact of everyone on self and each other to each other, to selfless service and feeling one with everything and everyone. This is a journey into wholeness and completeness, nothingness and the letting go of beliefs, allness and deep connection. And that journey, the way we view it, is through the process to awaken, which is curating that muscle of awareness and intention, to healing, which is based in inquiry and shadow work, going through the feelings that we've suppressed or repressed, and finally to manifestation, coming from a place of inspiration and surrender. This journey is about content and process, right? So we've had many individuals walk through this door, more than 300 people we facilitated through some of the most transformational experiences of their lives. And one thing that we remark is content versus process. Content is the stories, the beliefs, the feelings, the sensations that come up in the transformational process, right? Imagine going into talk therapy and conversing with the therapist. It's content that's coming out, right? And then there's process, how to open, be with, and transmute that content into understanding, acceptance, healing, and growth. Think of that as the tools in which you can meet your current content that's coming up, and for the future where you might experience challenges, and then you have a process, a structure to undergo those challenges. In the awakening portion of the journey, the process is awareness and allowing, versus what the default may have been of projection, suppression, and avoidance. Buddha and spiritual teacher David Hawkins both share that what we hold in mind tends to manifest. There's this quote that I love by Sri Dhammananda, a Buddhist teacher. The thought manifests as the word. The word manifests as the deed. The deed develops into habit, and the habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its way with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. In this process of awakening, of allowing and accepting, we believe that there are three channels: the path of the mind, the body, and the spirit. The way of the mind is about questioning beliefs. Once again, spiritual teacher Byron Katie shares that it's not our thoughts that create suffering. It's the fact that we believe our thoughts, right? We might have a thought of, I can't forgive, or I can't achieve, or I can't run a marathon. Those thoughts will come up, but it's whether we believe those thoughts, we give energy to those thoughts that matter. And our ability to replace those thoughts with intention, with commitment, with devotion, is how we can formulate the foundation for change. The second channel, the channel of the body, is about being with the inner sensation of our feelings, right? When you feel angry, for example, you might feel a stirring in your chest, heat, pressure, maybe a contraction or a tension. Every emotion has an energetic signature that is absolutely unique to your subjective experience of it. And it lives in the body. And so does intuition. Being with the sensation itself, rather than with the labels or the thought forms or the beliefs or the words of I need to, or I should, or I can't, allows us to get into an observer mindset. We dissociate from the triggered part of us, giving space to the actual inner sensation itself. This is a process that David Hawkins calls letting go. And then finally, the channel of the spirit. It's about being present and not trying to solve a problem. Think about how often you work to solve problems. You might be driving and hit traffic, and then, oh no, here's another problem of how do I get to where I got to get to in my expectation, right? Consider what boredom is. The very nature of boredom is the desire to experience something different. And it's another problem to solve. Pulling out the phone when in line, scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, putting music on when we drive. These are all problems that we're trying to solve instead of leaning into the present moment and being with what is. Content is within the awakening journey about being allowing and accepting, is to identify the patterns, triggers, and opportunities that we have. We like to call this trigger treasure hunting. When I feel triggered in a state of anger or in a state of guilt, that is always a signal for me to be able to go inwards, to let go of the grip of the anger and discover, why am I angry at myself? Where have I been out of integrity? Where did I not speak my needs or stay with my boundaries? The content allows us to take responsibility for our emotions. And so the content that we facilitate is something derived from the map of consciousness by David Hawkins. And I'm going to share my screen and show that to you guys here. David Hawkins is at one point owned the largest psychiatry practice in the United States. And then he became a hermit for 6 years in Sedona, where afterwards he wrote the seminal work, Power versus Force, one of the best-selling spiritual books of all time, that is rooted in psychology, spirituality, neuroscience, and modern technology. And the primary foundation of the work is this map of consciousness, where Hawkins charted the energies from shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, and pride, which is in the realm of weakness or force, forcing our way through life, to the flip at the level 200 of courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and finally enlightenment. And what Hawkins says is that by, by meeting our content with surrender and going through the process of letting go, which is diving into the inner sensation itself and allowing that inner sensation to um, really just exist without wanting to push it away or avoid it or project it out, naturally dissipates the sensation. For example, we work with a lot of people with deep grief, people that have lost a loved one very recently, or maybe in the process of losing a loved one. Oftentimes, the inner sensation of grief is so hard to confront. But when we are able to meet that inner sensation, to just be with it, over time it naturally dissipates. Hawkins cites an example from his psychiatry days. Have you ever been in one of those really awful cries where you just have tears streaming down, your makeup streaming, and you're just like, and you really can't hold it in? Those cries last a maximum of 30 minutes. And universally, people feel better after they've had a good cry. And that's because of the release of energy, where people are able to go through the process of grief and let go of that instead of gripping and holding on to it. So this is the content and the process that is in the awakening portion of what we consider the journey to modern enlightenment. Next, the second stage of the modern enlightenment journey is healing. This is embodied in the process of inquiry and letting go versus positions of apathy, fear, anger, or pride. You'll notice that the apathy, fear, anger, and pride are coming from this map of consciousness. Apathy being the source of depression, fear having the energy of I won't do this, I won't do that because I'm afraid of it. Anger being the source of violence and projection, and pride being a mask that we might hold to cover our shame and our guilt. The process of inquiry is really about taking radical responsibility to convert the statement of why is this happening to me to why is this happening for me. The word to for is such a dramatic shift. I like to give a metaphor. Imagine that your life, as you experience it, is a simulation, a video game, if you will, right? And imagine that every single person you meet is a character in your simulation. Every challenge that you face is a puzzle in your simulation, right? And at the end of your simulation, the end goal is to reach this place of deep understanding and enlightenment. In that sort of simulation, we can look at every single challenge, every moment and ounce of suffering, every person that we've harbored anger towards and non-forgiveness, and through radical responsibility, ascertain why they are in our lives to teach us something, to teach us how to be more in integrity, to teach us how to be more in love. And so there are these signals that come up when we take radical responsibility, right? And it's mental, physical, and spiritual, mapping to mind, body, spirit again. Mental signals are points of resistance like anxiety, stress, disappointment, anger. Hawkins says that stress comes from the accumulation of unacknowledged emotions. Consider a lifetime of grief or anger or shame or guilt that's been suppressed, living in the body. And that coming through, bleeding out when it's not met with consciousness. As an example, I used to not have a relationship with anger at all. I used to say, I'm not an angry person. But when I started to create a relationship with anger, I started to recognize that frustration and resentment are forms of anger that bleed out when I haven't actually acknowledged the anger that was underlying, right? When I feel resentment towards somebody, it's because I'm angry at them. I probably haven't expressed it to them, and I haven't resolved it in myself. And so it bleeds out as microaggressions. In the body, this can be pain, disease, or health issues, right? There's a seminal work by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score that we reference often. And in it, he shares extraordinary data over decades of research, right? As both a psychiatrist and a neurologist, discovering that the body really traps those emotions and energies that, when held long enough and when suppressed deeply enough, can actually lead to death. And so in this psycho-spiritual work, we often have an assumption that if there are physical ailments, if that somebody is coming in with pain, with lethargy, with sickness, that especially if it's recurring, that there is something psychosomatic that is still stuck in their system that gets to be met with consciousness. Then finally, the signals of resistance for spirit at a spiritual level is purposelessness and pessimism, right? It's looking at life as though life is against you. Looking at life as though it's meaningless, right? That itself generates so much resistance in the body, which can be lethargy, can be depression, can be not wanting to get up in the morning. The other part of the healing journey that we observe so much, and that feels so important to share, is this concept of spiritual bypassing. So we have a range of people that have come through these doors. People from war veterans to Fortune 500 CEOs, right? And everything in between. Spiritual bypassing happens. Spiritual bypassing is when we jump from the lower energies of feeling shame, guilt, anger, pride, fear, etc., straight to acceptance and love. Now, that might sound good in theory, but what ends up happening is that it's actually an insidious form of avoidance, because we're not meeting our anger or fear or grief or those energies in openness. We're not allowing them space. Instead, we're turning a blind eye to them and then jumping up to where we think we should be. Now, this does a couple things. The first is, when people undergo or begin a spiritual journey, they often feel obligated to forgive right away or to love thy neighbor no matter what thy neighbor did, right? But what ends up happening is they are either not acknowledging their feelings, or when they are not actually forgiving or accepting, it's generating more guilt, right? In other words, I might feel guilty for not being in a place of forgiveness because that's the default position that I believe I should be in. The other way that spiritual bypassing can show up is the externalization of the healing agent, right? Which externalizes responsibility and disempowers oneself. So you can see it pretty often in the spiritual community, where they say, oh, maybe Mars is in retrograde and therefore that's why I'm crazy today, right? The externalization of some power that is influencing who we are, or assigning the healing agent to the plant medicine or to spirit or to a facilitator or shaman, what that does is it externalizes responsibility. And ultimately what that does is it leads to the degradation of empowerment, the self-power that we have to heal and to be with ourselves. So spiritual bypassing is another process that we believe is extremely important to draw attention to and facilitate the awareness that the very nature of the healing process is internal, that it's all within one's own power. And there are accelerants along the way: great facilitation, plant medicine, meditation practices, etc. But all of those are just add-ons to yourself. who is your own healer. When we undergo the healing journey, lots of content comes up, right? Because in the awakening portion of the journey, the content that comes up is all this new awareness, all of our patterns, all of our reactions instead of responses, our triggers, etc. But as we dive deeper and go down the chain of looking into why this is happening for me, we discover some of these lower energies on Hawkins' map of consciousness. Fear, which comes from the distrust in one's own experience, which comes from the distrust in oneself, right? Because if you went into a dark room all by yourself and you felt fear, right? What if instead you fully trusted yourself to meet whatever might come up, right? To meet any challenge that might be present in that dark room? What if in that dark room you were able to meet pain with surrender instead of pushing it away? And so fear is inherently, the opposite of fear is inherently the trust in oneself to be able to meet life's challenges, right? And what Hawkins shares, what Buddha shares, what Krishna shares in the Hindu tradition is that the root of all fear is death. And so we do an exercise here in Ceremonia where two people pair up, they name a fear, and then the other partner asks, and then what, right? And each time feeling the impact of it. So a fear of, let's say, a fear of being late to a meeting, okay? And someone asking, and then what? And then I won't be invited in the future. And then what? And then I will be lonely. And then what? I won't have support. And then what? When I'm in pain, nobody's going to be there for me. And then what? Then I'll die because I won't have help. Going down the path of then and then what over and over again is the process by which we can start to be aware of and let go of our intrinsic fears. Another piece of content that often comes up is anger, right? Anger is such an interesting energy and emotion. Anger has what Hawkins calls the energy of doingness. Man, when I'm angry, I am activated and ready to do something about it. And that energy can be valuable. So many movements in the world have come from a place of anger. But through investigation, we're able to reveal what's underneath the anger. Psychologist John Gottman, who wrote this book called 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work and is considered the foremost expert on relationship dynamics and marriage, shared this idea of the anger iceberg, right? It's like when you see an iceberg, underneath the water, there's so much more. And underneath anger is often hidden shame or guilt, self-betrayal, or the dissatisfaction with one's own unresolved ways of being. And now a default position that I have is when I feel angry, it's because there's a truth that I have yet to discover and acknowledge within myself. An opportunity to discover a better way to be in integrity. Interestingly, anger is often suppressed because as kids, parents tell us, don't be angry, don't cry, don't be angry, just be a good little boy. And so we learn the process of pushing down our anger because it's not supposed to be a valuable emotion. Unfortunately, consider the energy of anger and how much energy there is in it, and then consider suppressing that into the body. That's a lot of energy to store up, right? Next, another piece of content that often comes up in the healing journey is pride, which is often used to mask shame, guilt, or unworthiness. Pride is really the projection of ego, the belief that one knows when one really doesn't. Pride has been and continues to be my greatest shadow. And as I've dived deeper and deeper into my pridefulness and understanding the where I can meet pride with willful humility, has really helped me understand the levels of shame and unworthiness that I've held onto as limiting beliefs, which has given me such an opportunity to let go of those positions. So the content that often comes up in healing is fear, anger, and pride, with the process of taking radical responsibility, going through the process of inquiry and letting go. Finally, in the manifestation portion, the process is visioning and surrender versus the positions of rush, force, and avoidance. This is really about going from having things to doing things to being something, right? When we do our interviews for Ceremonia, the first question we ask is, who are you? And you can really chart where somebody is in their consciousness journey based on the answer. Does one define themselves from the things they have? I have a house, I have these cars, I have these things. Do they define themselves by the things that they do, right? I'm a CEO. I'm a runner. I'm an artist, so on and so forth. I'm doing these things. Or is it a state of being that they are, right? Like the state of being coming from the feeling that we all seek. When we buy a house or we buy a car or we buy a new iPhone, we're not actually buying the thing. We're buying a feeling. We're seeking a feeling of, let's say in the case of a house, it might begin as a desire for the feeling of safety and security, but it might also be the feeling of validation, which comes from pride, right? And so coming to the understanding that it's the feeling that we seek that defines our being is such a powerful idea, because we can feel that thing without actually seeking out the having or the doing. Now, the reason why manifesting is third in the process of the modern enlightenment journey is because our belief is that if we try to manifest too early before undergoing the healing journey, we end up manifesting situations that create suffering for us to actually heal, right? Because again, in healing, the content that might come up of pride is knowing something when we really don't, and avoiding the actual inquiry to discover what we actually know of ourselves. Imagine believing that your mission in life is to do X, but not having done the self-work to discover why X is so important to you, right? And so in this regard, what's important to us and what we facilitate is identifying what we call in psychology organizing principles. And this begins with the feeling of the greatest safety, love, and connection you've ever felt in your life. Pause for a moment and take that in. Recall a moment from your childhood where you felt deep safety, love, and connection. That feeling is the feeling that we seek in life. That is the very foundation of the inner journey. And everything that we have, everything that we do, and everything we try to be is in pursuit of that feeling of safety and love. And so if we can harness the inner sensation of that feeling and allow that to be our compass, we're able to bring the shadow into the light, right? Because the very opposite of that in the shadow is the feeling of non-safety, aka danger, right? The feeling of non-love, aka isolation or abandonment, right? The feeling of non-connection, which is loneliness. And that's what we're running away from. That's what we don't want to feel. That's what triggers our reactions of avoidance, suppression, or repression. And so life is motivated by this drive towards safety and love and away from danger and isolation. And that's our shadows and that's our light. For me, one of the processes we facilitate is to look at where we get the shadow and this light, right? We get it from our caretakers, our mother and our father, right? On my father's side, his shadow that I inherited is that of manipulation, which is coming from the place of pride and manipulating people to an end of his, right? The shadow on my mother's side is that of a savior complex or giving without consent. And so that might manifest as people pleasing and not having boundaries. But when I've brought that into the light, the same energy that's in the shadow of manipulation is in the light as guidance, guidance with consent, right? The same shadow that is the savior complex or giving without consent on my mother's side, in the light is acceptance of others and selfless service. And so I've lived so much of my life in the shadow of manipulating people to save them, which doesn't feel good for anybody. And now moving into a position where I'm able to, with consciousness, move into a place of guiding with consent from a place of selfless service. And so you see the very nature of manifesting is directed towards manifesting that which is our healing journey. And so when we undergo the healing journey first, we're able to manifest from a place of greater purity, clarity, and understanding. Our greatest vision is always to expand this feeling that we're searching for, right? So if you think about everything that you've held on as a vision, right? It might be building a big company. It might be creating big impact. It might be healing your family dynamic, whatever it is. If you examine the feeling that you're seeking in the actual event itself, that feeling is probably one of great love, fulfillment, connection, and safety. This process begins by identifying the limiting beliefs, right? Statements like I can't, which is in the energy of apathy. Again, I can't forgive. I can't build a company. I can't sell my paintings, right? Transmuting that to I won't, because I can't is from an energy of victimhood. I won't, which is in the energy of fear, at least takes responsibility. And the shift from I can't to I won't is such a tremendous energetic shift because it's the moment where we get to empower ourselves to make choice, right? So going from I can't forgive to I won't forgive is already such a giant energetic shift. The next would be I should. I should do something, which comes from pride or anger. I should forgive. That can be spoken with an energy of anger. Like I should be making it on time to this meeting. Or it could be from an energy of pride because I should be better than this. Then transmuting this energy of force or weakness to power and strength, beginning with the statement of I can. I can, which comes from courage, to I will, which comes from willingness, right? So going from I can't to I won't to I can is such a dramatic movement through life. And then the position of willingness on Hawkins' map of consciousness, the position of I will is an openness, right? It's an openness to the opportunity to do something. Then the next is I know how to, which is the energy of reason on Hawkins' map of consciousness, which is where we really understand how to do the thing that we want to do. And then finally to I am. I am this. So when under the example of I can't forgive, what is the feeling that we seek by forgiving others? And I would posit that feeling is one of harmony and peace. And coming to a place where we've went from I can't forgive to I can forgive to I know how I know how to forgive, to I am peace, I am peaceful, and I am harmonious. This is the transmutation from those lower energies of force to these upper energies of self-empowerment. And so we go through this exercise. This is, in fact, a workshop that we do called the I Am workshop. We go through this exercise of identifying our limiting beliefs and then brainstorming at every hurdle how to deconstruct and transmute that limiting belief. So let's say you have a something that you want to manifest, right? Let's say you want to build a company, okay? You want to launch, let's say you want to launch a new product. And as you start brainstorming the steps to do so, and let's say there are 10 steps, at each step, you might hit a place where you say, I can't, or I won't, right? I can't raise money. I can't launch a website. I can't find the time to do this, so on and so forth, right? Each time there's a limiting belief there that under investigation can be transmuted to an I am statement. At that time, you can have a collection of feelings that you're actually seeking, because every I can't statement results in a feeling that you want. And then it's about embodying that feeling, living in that state of being, a continuous state of living, doing, and acting from that place of inspiration. So imagine if in your set of I can't statements, transmuting that to I can and I am statements, right? Transmuting the limiting beliefs to empowering beliefs. Imagine that at that stage now, you are embodying I am peaceful, I am loving, I am complete, I am trusting, I am capable, I am powerful. So many different affirmative statements, right? And then actually embodying that creates a very high energetic state, which leads us to the law of attraction. There's this famous book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain that we often cite here. And he says that in life, you first climb this first mountain, this mountain of prestige and accolades and career, etc. And then as you sit atop this mountain, let's say, we work with a lot of founders. So somebody who's recently sold their company, right? They sit atop this first mountain and then they're like, oh, life isn't what I thought it would be. And they might meet somebody who could be a scuba diver, who could be an artist, who could be a minister. And they're able to feel a level of being, a deep level of joyfulness and peace that they've been seeking all along. And that's when they peer the second mountain, right? The second mountain built on values and commitments. So imagine already being in that state of being peaceful, in love, in goodness, in integrity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What would get attracted to you because you start being magnetic? People start recognizing in you that you have something that they want. And they're willing to invest energy, time, money. They're willing to promote you. That is the core of the law of attraction from a place of truth and beingness. All of that was the process that I just described in manifestation. And the content that we actually see is all these limiting beliefs, right? And one of the biggest pieces of content is this energy of desire. So oftentimes when people say that they want to manifest something, that often carries with it the energy of wantingness, right? Like, I want to manifest $1 million. That energy of wantingness is on this map of consciousness at a very low energy level. And you've probably been around people that are constantly wanting things from you. How often do you want to give it to them, right? Versus people that don't want something from you, but are coming from a place of their own joyful inspiration. And how often do you want to be around people like that, right? So imagine somebody who is, let's take some extremes, somebody who is a beggar, who is coming from the energy of desire, versus an artist who is coming from the energy of just wanting to create things. Which one would you be more magnetized to, right? And so Hawkins gives this process of converting wantingness to intention, to commitment, choice, and then surrender, right? So let's break that down. Intention is the foundation of any change. I used to think that people can't change. And now I know that with intention, we can move mountains, right? And then making a commitment from the place of that intention, then choosing to take responsibility, going from the I won't to I can, to make that choice. And then finally, surrender is the position of allowing, of acceptance, releasing expectation. Because the very last morsel of wantingness is embedded in expectation, right? How often have you wanted something, expected to get it, and didn't? And then that just backtracked you all the way back to anger or guilt, right? Imagine instead starting in wantingness, setting an intention for a way of being, and then just allowing life to be. And how powerful it will be to release that expectation and the release of good or bad as labels and just be with what is. All of the content that comes up in the manifesting journey brings into the picture relationships and allies through this law of attraction, right? And so people naturally will enter your field who want to help you, and you'll naturally identify people that you want to help. And so there's this interrelationship between surrender and service, where one can surrender who they want to be, surrender their expectations, and be in service to others, which then attracts people and resources to their lives. This was the process and the content of the manifestation journey. And so this is bringing us to the conclusion where this modern enlightenment, this arc of transformation that I'm sharing with you, is a process of learning tools, modern tools based in psychology and spirituality to awaken, which is to curate that awareness, to heal, which is based in inquiry and radical responsibility, to manifesting, which is based in surrender and identifying limiting beliefs. Ceremonia, which is a nonprofit psychedelic church that I'm a co-founder of, and we facilitate this arc of transformation with psychedelic sacraments of psilocybin and ayahuasca. So our arc of transformation maps to awaken, heal, and manifest. Awaken is a 6-week program with a 4 to 5 day journey working with psilocybin. Our next Awaken journeys are in January 12th to 15th, and then February 22 to 26. So that's a 4-day journey, January 12 to 15, starting pretty soon here because it's a 6-week program, and then February 22 to 26. And what we facilitate there is this mind, body, spirit protocol where we're teaching the tools of process and meeting the content that comes up, empowering with a priority for people to empower themselves to leverage the tools they learn to meet their own content, which then they can take into the future when they go integrate back into real life with this magnificent tool belt of consciousness processes. Next is the healing journey, which is a 6-week program and a 5-day retreat. Our next one is March 15th to 19th, working with ayahuasca. And this is where we get into shadow work. So shadow work, the reason why this is the second portion of our arc of transformation is because shadow work is really intense, right? When I first started engaging in shadow work, there was so much disruption that came into my system and into my life because I was finally aware of all the things that I've been avoiding in my life, especially the pride and the anger. And so the facilitated shadow work is with experts that are really holding us in the content that comes up that have been long suppressed. Thank you so much for your presence here. I've enjoyed this talk so much myself and giving it. And I'm going to open the room for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself. And if you have anything that you want to share about your journey or any questions about our upcoming programs, you can visit ceremoniacircle.org. And that gives plentiful information, and you can apply for our future journeys. Thank you. So I believe I'm going to stop this recording here.